Hi, I'm Lowell Joseph Gallin, and our guest for today's interview is Rav Yaakov Moshe Poupko. Shalom, Rav Yaakov Moshe. Thank you for being a guest on our show. And our subject for today's interview is the upcoming festival of Purim, which is next week on Sunday nationwide, and on Monday Shushan Purim in what's classified as a walled city, the city of Jerusalem. Rav Yaakov Moshe, what would you like to tell our viewers about Purim and the eternity of this festival in the Jewish tradition?
Well, Purim is indeed endowed with a degree of eternity greater than that of all the other holidays. The rabbis of the Talmud tell us that if we could even imagine a world in which all of the other festivals were somehow obsolete, Purim would endure forever. And my mentor's mentor used to use the following story to explain why Purim endures beyond the era of all the other holidays.
Could you tell us who your mentor was and who your mentor's mentor was, so we can introduce our viewers a little bit to some of the sages of the Jewish tradition going back to Moses at Mount Sinai? Because that is our teaching. There's an unbroken train of tradition from Moses at Mount Sinai to the sages of today.
Well, my own mentor was His Saintly Eminence, Rav Yaakov Weinberg, and his own personal mentor was Rav Yitzchak Hutner. And Rabbi Hutner, because of his great literary abilities, was very often versatile in his use of metaphor. And here's the story that he used to use to explain this special measure of eternity, which belongs to Purim alone. Rabbi Hutner would say, imagine a group of people who are total strangers to each other, who somehow have come to be thrown together in a room in the dark. How is it that these total strangers can get to know each other? Well, one way they could simply do it is everyone would say his name and a word or two, and then you would learn to associate a voice with a name. One fellow would say, well, I'm Mr. Goldstein, Mr. Friedman, Mr. Klein, and everyone in the room would associate a name with a voice, and this is how all these 15 people who never before saw each other would get to know each other. That's one way they could learn to identify themselves to each other. And of course, there's another method. They could simply turn on the light switch. The question is, which of the two is better? Now, needless to say, at first blush, one would say, simply turn on the light switch. It's so much simpler, and the distinctions are much clearer. But Rabbi Hutner would say, no, that's not the way. And the reason is this. Because you see, in just 3 or 4 hours, the sun is going to rise. And the dazzling light of the sun is something which will be so much clearer than the puny 100-watt bulb that now everything they saw pales into insignificance compared to the clarity with which they were able to see each other now in the bright light of the sun. So they've gained absolutely nothing for having spent that time together. But if instead they would have let the darkness remain, refrained from turning on the light, then they would learn each other's voices and associate a name with a voice, then no matter how brightly the sun is going to shine, they walk away having learned something. They walk away with something for having spent those hours together. So Rabbi Hutner would say the same goes with the great miracles. We have these very, very great, open, dazzling miracles that are associated with our exodus from Egypt, and all 3 of our festivals, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, are associated with those dazzling miracles of the exodus from Egypt.
I had a footnote. Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, Rabbi Poupko, means Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles, for those who are not familiar with the Hebrew. The 3 Shalosh Regalim, the biblical pilgrimage festivals, Regalim as in regal, as in feet, as in you go. You go on pilgrimage to Jerusalem if you can get there, and if you can't, you send an offering or a gift by representatives to go there. So those are the Shalosh Regalim, the 3 biblical pilgrimage festivals of Pesach, Passover, Shavuot, Pentecost, and Sukkot, Tabernacles, which is in the fall. Please.
And those 3 that you just mentioned are all associated with fantastic, dazzling miracles. There were the 10 plagues, there was the splitting of the sea. These are very, very clear, open miracles. But when the times of Messiah come, there will be such dazzling miracles that those other dazzling miracles could actually pale into insignificance. But Purim is unique. On Purim, there were no open defiances of natural law. Not at all. The reason we know about God's providence in Purim is because of our development of a certain sensitivity to subtleties. So because of the fact that we know about Purim, precisely because we developed that sensitivity to subtleties, then no matter how brightly the light of the Messiah and his miracles will shine, we're left with something for having developed that sensitivity to subtleties.
Could you give our viewers a little background who don't know the Purim story? What happens in Shushan, in Persia, 2,600 years ago, more or less?
Yes.
And where, as Rav Poupko says, Joshua doesn't command the sun to stand still or the dial to go back on the time clock. It's all a series of events which seem to be, you can view as random or coincidental, where the Jews at that time, Yehudim, in the land of Persia, threatened with total annihilation, Nazi Amalekite style, and the situation is turned upside down and inside out, and the evil Haman, who seems to have everything all sewed up, and we're on our way to the gas chambers, ends up hung from the gallows. But that's just an introduction to what Rav Yaakov Moshe will tell us about Purim.
So all of those events happened well within the confines of natural law. The king went ahead and had to replace a disobedient wife with Esther. He was totally unaware of the fact that she was Jewish. And there was this Haman, a Persian bent on genocide, just like our own Ahmadinejad. But without getting into all of the lengthy details, what happened was that Esther was able to very, very shrewdly manipulate things so that Haman and all of his genocidal aspirations was totally thwarted. That everything happened within the confines of natural law. And the reason that Mordechai and Esther were so much more successful in this confrontation with Amalek than Moses and Joshua themselves is simply because of the fact that they were able to see God within the confines of nature. When Moses and Joshua were done with Amalek, they were unable to confront and be a counterforce to Esav.
Let's just add a note here. Before we go to comparison of Mordechai and Esther, the heroes of the Purim story, and Moses, and who was the other one?
Joshua.
Moses and Joshua, the heroes of the Exodus story. I want to add a footnote. Rav Yaakov Moshe mentioned that Ahasuerus, the king of Persia, had to replace a disobedient wife. According to our sages, what her disobedience consisted of, he invited her to appear before his to his drinking party with his buddies with no clothes on, and she said, "No, I'm not coming to that," an early feminist. And the guys said, "Look, if we permit this, all our wives will be in rebellion." So Ahasuerus replaced her by having her killed. I just wanted to add that as a note. That's one line of interpretation of our sages of what constitutes a disobedient wife. And in my opinion, 3 cheers for disobedience, and Vashti, we're with you. So let's go back for a second. Mordechai and Esther are successful in dealing with Amalek. For those of you who don't know, Amalek represents the principle of total destruction of the children of Israel. You can't convert and become an Amalekite. You couldn't convert and become a Nazi. Throughout history, you could convert to various forms of Islam. You could convert to various forms of Christianity. You can't un-Jew yourself and show up at the Nazi party office. I want to join the party. You can't un-Jew yourself. All Jews were slated for total mass destruction. This is what Amalek represents.
Well, there's a reason that Moses and Joshua were less effective, and that is this.
Less effective in which sense? Because there was a battle on the way out of Egypt with Amalek, and we prevailed, but didn't destroy them totally.
Well, we did not exactly prevail. The word that the Torah actually uses is Vayachalosh, that is that Joshua weakened the enemy. Joshua did not defeat the enemy. Not only that, but the story ends with God saying, well, I'm going to keep the struggle going generation after generation. Ultimately, we will have victory. The clear implication being that victory actually eluded them. They simply succeeded in surviving.
A footnote here. As we were on the way out of Egypt, the Israelites, and I use the term Israelites because Jews from the tribe of Judah are one of the 12 tribes of Israel. The Israelites, the 12 tribes, were on their way out of Egypt, led by Moses. And Amalek, who is the grandson of Esav, comes and attacks the children of Israel, especially going after the weak and the helpless. among the Israelites. Moses leads the Israelites in war against Amalek, and when he gets tired of holding up the staff of God, Joshua and Caleb,
Hur.
Joshua and Hur hold up his arms, and as Rav Yaakov Moshe said, weakens Amalek but doesn't destroy him. The same tragedy with King Saul, who weakens the adversary, but doesn't wipe him out, as a result of which the prophet Samuel says, "You're not worthy to be king, God has chosen another," and he's replaced with David. So this battle goes on until the end of time, and then Amalek is totally destroyed.
But let's not forget one thing. The confrontation between Mordechai and Esther on the one hand and Amalek on the other ends up with illumination, celebration, joy, and glory. When Moses and Joshua are done with Amalek, there are absolutely no illumination, celebration, joy, and glory. Instead, there's just an almost desperate vow made where the Almighty says, "My throne is flawed, my name is still flawed, and we're going to keep up the struggle." There isn't any sense of victory. So ultimately, Mordechai and Esther were far more successful. Their confrontation, Amalek, ended up with the Jewish people experiencing illumination, celebration, joy, and glory. Now we have
translate that for our viewers.
Illumination, celebration, joy, and glory.
And that's coming up this Sunday nationwide, and on Monday in Jerusalem we have Purim parties and festive meals, and children get dressed up like in the non-Jewish world in America for Halloween, which I understand Europeans don't have a Halloween. That's an American tradition. I grew up with that. Trick or treat. There's a time of great happiness because, as Rav Yaakov Moshe said, there's total destruction of Amalek, and a situation where the Jews were convinced, that's it, we're all on the trains to Treblinka, at the last minute the tables are turned, and Haman and his sons are hung from the gallows, and there's a total turnaround, like in the 6-Day War, the Arabs were convinced, that's it, we're going to finish them off, and in 6 days Israel kicks the kugel out of all the combined Arab armies, and the whole world rejoices at this, because they even the most secular person sees the hand of a higher power. And there are many records of people acknowledging that.
There's a mystical angle to this. You see, we have a mystical tradition that says each and every one of our enemies gains dominance over us precisely to the degree to which we fail, fail in that evil which they represent. To the extent to which we accept Amalekism, to that extent Amalek gains victory over us. And what happened was this. We know the essence of Amalek is the denial of God as a force in this world. Well, the Torah tells us that what preceded the attack of Amalek, and that is, the Jews said, Hayesh Hashem b'kilbeinu. Is God really a powerful force amongst us?
It began with doubt. Doubt opens the door for Amalek to come in.
And every single nation,
lack of faith.
Every enemy of ours is able to gain dominance of us precisely to the degree to which we submit to their particular evil.
I have a question. Could you explain a little bit, and this is just an introduction to the vast oceans of wisdoms of the Torah and our sages, so we're almost finished with this first of what I hope will be many interviews with my teacher of many years, Rav Yaakov Moshe, and I'm glad to finally get him on camera. I know how to operate a camera. A year ago I didn't think in terms of filming or taking pictures. If I had a camera, it was an Instamatic, and I didn't use it anyway. So here I have this fancy camera on this tripod. My students, or I was their student when I started getting involved with acting, they taught me how to use all this stuff and told me where to buy it. So here's the question. In the history of the children of Israel, we have been persecuted by the descendants of Ishmael, which became the Islamic world, the descendants of Esau, the Christian world, and then there's Amalek. What is the difference between the kinds of... What Amalek represents total destruction, whereas with Esau and Ishmael, you could convert and become a Muslim and a Christian. You can't convert and become a Nazi. You were just soap and lampshades material, period. What is the fundamental difference in a nutshell, or in a fortune cookie, if you could, to conclude our first interview, about the nature of the persecution of Esau, Ishmael, and Amalek of the children of Israel? I know that's a heavy question to ask for fortune cookie answers.
It's a very, very broad question. I think that it might be better just to focus on Esau himself.
Okay.
And that is, he himself is a somewhat ambivalent person, and that's
the brother of Isaac. Isaac.
No, the brother of the
Sorry,
twin of
I got to
Jacob.
make a document. Isaac and Rebekah had Jacob and Esau.
Twins.
Twins, which is twins. Genetically twins. Amazing.
And the Torah actually divides Esau into two components. Edom, whom we are told is our brother, that we must actually refrain from hating, and in fact develop a brotherly relationship with him. Lo tataev edomi ki achichahu. But there's this other component of Esau, which is Amalek. And he represents the murderous, genocidal drive within Esau. So Esau became divided into these two different components. He himself was a man torn by profound ambivalences in his attitude towards good and evil. The evil expressed itself in Amalek, and the Torah tells us that Edom, on the other hand, is to be treated as a brother.
And I have a question/comment to conclude our interview. It says in the Torah that Abraham was buried by Ishmael and Isaac together, and Isaac was buried by Yaakov and Esau together. And our sages, and I have a sage right here to confirm that what I'm saying is true, see this as a sign of what will be in the end of days. There will be a harmony between the descendants of Esau and the descendants of Israel, and the descendants of Ishmael and the descendants of Israel. There's also another reference where Jacob, when he's parting from Esau, as Jacob is coming back to the land of Israel, says, I will come to see you at Mount Seir, the mountain of Esau. And that never happens, so the sages say it will happen in the future. There will be a worldwide global reconciliation. Looking at our world today, it may seem possible how many ethnic and religious groups will reconcile with each other. Nevertheless, God says to Jeremiah, there's nothing too hard for me. And if he said it will be, therefore it will be. Could you tell us, is there any possibility of a reconciliation with Amalek? Or is Amalek simply totally destroyed, that's it?
No, there is a certain dark impulse within humanity with which no one else can make peace. And that is expressed in Amalek.
That's it, then?
That is it, yes. We are judgmental. There is such a thing as pure evil. It takes on different forms. You know, when Jacob was wrestling with Esau, and he said to him, who are you? And he said, what difference does it make? And I think what he meant to say is the following. Evil simply seems to collapse in this world and then simply takes on a different form. You know, that when Nazism was collapsed, we thought that we were the ultimate redemption. And it turned out that no, evil just took on a different form, communism. As soon as the Soviet collapsed, we thought we were in a Messianic era, and then there was the radical Islamist. So what Esau was telling Jacob is, it doesn't matter. There's no point in getting into these labels, Nazi, communist, jihadist. The fact is, until the ultimate redemption, good and evil are on a somewhat equal footing. You may think that you've collapsed the evil, but it's simply taking on a new form.
Rav Yaakov Moshe, thank you very much for this first interview, and we hope that our viewers, including our non-viewers, Jewish viewers, will have the opportunity to find a local Chabad house or some place where maybe you get invited to Purim Simcha and to see what this is like. Or if you're in Crown Heights, you can go to the Lubavitch. They know how to have a Simcha. And we hope that maybe this Purim will be the Purim of the final redemption. We always hope for that. We never give up hope. That's one of the fundamental teachings of Judaism. You never give up hope. It ain't over till it's over, as Yogi Berra said. Rabbi Yogi Berra. Rabbi Yaakov Moshe, thank you very much.